Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. It's Mustard Saves, and if you guys have been here for a while, you know the drill. My refrigerator is destitute. That's dog food. There's one slice of banana bread left in there. This container right here has remnants of corn and bell pepper. That has like 2 servings left of a rice and bean dish that I made in my slow cooker, and then there's like 4 eggs in there, and then all of my condiments and whatnot. So in order to keep myself at home and prevent spending extra unnecessary funds on eating out, I am going to be doing some meal prep. And today's meal prep kind of has a theme. I have an abundance of pasta that has been building up in my pantry. If you guys remember a couple months ago, there was an awesome Swagbucks deal on these Cheeto mac and cheese, and they're also just delicious in general. So I always have those on hand. This is some brown rice pasta that I got as a gift from a family member. It came in like a Costco sized container because from the couponing deals I used to have a ton of pasta sauce, but now I just have like this little bit of the noodles left. And then this brand right here, you'll actually find this at CVS included on their 5 for $5 everyday price sale. But recently I decided to close one of my CVS accounts. I have 2 different CVS accounts and they're both technically still open, but what I mean by close is I don't have the time or resources to be able to go out and do all of the great deals that some people do at CVS. Once upon a time, I lived walking distance from a CVS, but that is no longer the case. And so for one of my accounts, I just wanted to spend all of my extra bucks and just get rid of it so that way I only had the one account to worry about. And on one of the days that I went to CVS, they had these pastas on clearance, and they were only on clearance for 90 cents, but since I was using extra bucks, 90 cents is still a comparable price to Walmart prices, and that just meant that I didn't have to spend money on food out of my own pocket. I could just grab a bunch of these and go. So I have a ton of spaghetti noodles from my food pantry, and then now I have a bunch of these shaped pastas from that clearance deal, and just overall noodles have taken over my pantry. So what I am going to be making with these 4 style of noodles is going to be a Hamburger Helper style thing with the Cheetos mac and cheese. I usually use the regular plain mac and cheese that I get from my food pantry because it's not always the best brand, and so I like to doctor it up and turn it into Hamburger Helper so that way it tastes a little bit better, but I feel like eating Cheetos mac and cheese, so that's what I'm gonna make today. With this bag of pasta right here, I'm going to be recreating the chili and noodles that I made in one of my most recent videos. It kind of turned into a household favorite, even though that chili isn't like the best quality chili. We are a simple folk here, and we like trash food. That's all I can say about that. Look, I have radioactive cheese in my house. We like trash food. So I'm going to be making that again, but this time I'm going to be putting hot dogs in it because that chili tastes like the kind of chili that you can buy in a can. It's like super cheap and it goes on hot dogs. So I'm going to put hot dogs in it because, like I said, we're basically raccoons in this house. So that's what I'm going to make with that. And then with the spaghetti, I'm going to make spaghetti. There's nothing fancy about that. And then with these brown rice noodles, I have some lobster shells that have been taking up space in my freezer because I keep telling myself that I'm going to make stock out of the lobster shells, and then I continue to not do that. So in an effort to clean out my freezer and get those shells out of there, I'm going to be attempting to make a soup by turning those lobster shells into stock. So now that we've got our lovely introduction out of the way, let me set up the camera and let's get on to the cooking. I'm not sure what inspired me to start doing this, but for the last 2 years or so, I have been doctoring my spaghetti sauce with mashed sweet potato. I find that it's a great way to stretch the volume of the sauce while also giving the sauce some sweetness and a more velvety texture. I think I started doing this because I didn't want to add cheese, and so I needed something to make it creamy, and mashed sweet potato was just like delicious. And these potatoes that I'm using are pretty ugly on the outside, but we must never judge a book by its cover. They are a very hearty vegetable, and once you peel back the skin, you have a nice and beautiful potato underneath. And if you find that any of the impurities go deeper than skin level on your potato, just go ahead and take the pointy end of your peeler and use it like a spoon to scrape out that whatever it is. While my potato was boiling, I started to brown up a pound of regular sausage. The last time I made spaghetti, I used ground beef, but I wanted to try this great value sausage. One, because I already had it in my freezer, and two, it's like half the price of regular ground beef. Plus, it comes pre-seasoned, so if you don't have any extra seasonings in your pantry, this could be a good way to stretch the seasoning of a pre-jarred sauce. And I actually didn't think I needed the whole pound of it, so I took about half of it out once everything was nice and brown. And now, if you want the mashed potato to be a smoother texture, please use something other than a spatula, like a fork, a potato masher, a blender. Anything would do a better job than what I'm doing here, but I'm not a fan of doing more dishes than I have to, so I can live with some lumpy potato in my pasta. For jarred sauce, I usually like to doctor it with some extra Italian seasoning, but I seem to have underestimated how much sauce I was going to need today, and I didn't want to open another jar of sauce, so I added some margarine and about a tablespoon of this garlic parmesan seasoning packet. And I definitely think the sausage would have added more flavor if it was an actual, like, quality sausage, but it's just great value. So it was like, okay, I guess. I've had several comments suggest that lentils could be an even cheaper way to get this same effect, so I may have to try that out in the future. But for the flavor of the final dish, I think I might be in love with that seasoning packet. The Walmart jarred sauce is fine, but if you can afford to squeeze in a couple extra cents on a seasoning packet, I would definitely recommend trying it out. This next thing is something I have already made on my channel before. It's a little DIY Hamburger Helper. I started by browning a whole pound of ground beef into a medium saucepan. This probably wasn't the best cooking tool to use, but I was making all of these meals at the same time, so I chose this as a close enough fit for the job while I had all of my other 3 burners running on the stove at the same time. Anyway, so once the meat was cooked, I added about 3 or 4 cups of water to the pan and brought them to a boil. I don't have any other pots available in this moment to cook my noodles, so my goal was to go for a 1-pot meal and use just enough water to cook the noodles. As such, I didn't drain the fat from the meat because most mac and cheese boxes ask for butter or margarine to be added, so I just opted to use the meat as is in lieu of adding those butter or margarine. When the water came to temp, I tossed in my noodles and went on to make the same mistake that I made last time. I thought there wasn't enough water in the pot, so I topped it off, and it ended up being way too much water. If the surface area of the pan were larger, this may have been easier to fix by just leaving it to boil without the lid on, but in this case, I did drain about 1 cup of water. I didn't want to take out too much and risk losing all of the flavor from the ground beef. So I did leave the noodles to cook a little longer to evaporate some of the noodles, and it did leave the noodles slightly overcooked, and the overall flavor ended up being a bit weaker than what I was anticipating. And if you can see in this clip, it actually still looks quite a bit liquidy at the bottom, but once I left it to cool, I don't know if the sauce thickened or if the noodles just soaked up the rest of the water, but all of that water was gone by the time it cooled down enough for you to be able to eat it. And now, to satisfy my American taste for unhealthy garbage, I wanted to revisit this chili noodle dish that I made a few weeks ago. I have indeed received comments from locals who eat this kind of meal that I did indeed use the incorrect packet of chili, and I understand this pack of chili looks not great. And the flavor reminds me of canned chili that my family uses to put on top of hot dogs, so in homage to that, I did indeed get myself some hot dogs and toast them up to put them in this dish. In my research on people's feelings about chili, the preference of serving chili on noodles seems to be a northeastern practice, think like the Ohio and Michigan area, which led to an interesting find that when I tried to search for Michigan-style chili recipe, What came up were a lot of recipes for something called hot sauce or hot dog sauce mixed in with the regular chili recipes. Like there were still Michigan style chilies, but also in the same recommended stream, there were things for this hot dog sauce, as in sauce to put on top of a hot dog. Is there a correlation between these two? I have no idea. Perhaps we have a local watching this video who can explain the culture in the comments. And I'm definitely not trying to say that this is like a strange practice in any way, shape, or form. And I'm also not trying to like turn your culture into something disgusting with this weird looking packet. Because this packet of chili is certainly nothing like the fresh, real chili that would come out of using those recipes, because they looked absolutely delicious. I just happened to have this packet and I happen to like using it this way. But as it stands right now, I do receive this packet of chili from my local food pantry, so it is something that is going to be rolling through my home every so often. And I'm just glad that I have found a way to use it in a way that we find palatable. For my final trick, I dug out this bag of lobster shells that has been sitting in my freezer ever since I did my budget anniversary dinner like 3 months ago. They've just been mocking me the way bananas do when you put them in your freezer and you tell them that you're going to make them into banana bread someday, and then it's 6 months later and those bananas are still there. So in order to finally use them up, I decided I was going to make a seafood noodle soup. I have no other seafood to mix into this, so in practice, this certainly could be elevated. After I felt I had simmered the exoskeleton for as long as I could wait, I strained out the bodysuit pieces and set the broth off to the side while I started sauteing some celery and onion. When you're working with vegetables from your freezer, you want to pick the heat up a little bit higher than you normally would, because their cellular structure has been compromised and they're going to let off a lot of water once they thawed out. And I know the discoloration of my pan makes it hard to see, but once I got some brown fond growing at the bottom of my pot, I poured my broth back in. And you'll notice that I saved some at the end, and the only reason that I did that is I do not own a fine mesh strainer or any muslin or cheesecloth. So to save myself the chance of encountering a crunchy shell in my soup, I'm just gonna play it safe and leave those floaty bits out of the equation. For my seasonings, I tossed in 2 bay leaves, some basil, and as much Tony's Creole seasoning as I felt it needed to taste good. And I'm not entirely convinced that bay leaves actually add anything to the party, but I have them, so I threw them in. And once my pot came to a boil, I poured in my noodles until they were done. At this point, if you feel that you've added too much water to your broth and you'd rather have less volume to your soup, feel free to do all of this boiling without the lid on to let some of the water evaporate. And to give this soup some more substance, my final touches included 1 can of carrots and a can of peas. These are 2 ingredients that I don't mind, but I don't much care for either, so this was a great way to pawn them off and make them more palatable. Although I did still feel like the whole thing was looking a bit dull, so to brighten it up, I finished off with some frozen kale and called it a day. Alright, you guys, so it is like almost 9 o'clock, a little bit past 9, something like that. And I am tired. But I got everything done, and now my refrigerator will have real food in it once again. The spaghetti made way more than this. Well, not way more, but it made more than this, but that's what we ended up having for dinner. So we just took out enough to get it to fit into this large container. This was not all of the macaroni, but some of it has been put away in a separate container to take for lunch. And this container was too small for this amount, so that's definitely gonna cool into one like block of mac and cheese, but you know, it'll be fine. When we heat it up, it'll fluff up. But I just did not want to get another dish out when I realized it was too small, so squished it is. And then as for these two, they just need to cool while I am getting ready for bed, and then I'll package this up in a container, but then this soup, I'll just pop the lid on and stick the whole thing in the fridge. I hope you guys got some good inspiration out of this video. I know it was definitely nothing exciting, but not all meal plans have to be exciting, and this soup is probably the most nutritious thing that I made today. But when you're working on a budget, sometimes these are just the legitimate ingredients that you have in your pantry. So we're not going to talk about nutrition here, we're just going to talk about how we are grateful that we have food to fill our refrigerators and move on with our day. And without further ado, as always, if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. And I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!